Talking Anxiety, from a life of anxiety to a motivational speaker with Nick Elston. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to our channel. If you're on YouTube, click the alert notification button, and if you like the video, please click like and share.
Thank you so much for being here today. I know that some of you that are here are some of our wonderful clients already, so a big hello to you. If you are new to Give a Grad a Go and don't know too much about what we do, then I'll really quickly go through everything now. So we are a graduate recruitment services, and our clients range from startups to global institutions. All of our services are completely bespoke, and we can fit your specific hiring needs. We do also have a document, our new client brochure, and in that you can write out what your hiring needs are, and then we can tailor our recruitment program specifically to you and what you're looking for. With all of our roles, we have a 13-day average workday time to fill a role, so there's a really quick turnover, and that is because we already have such a brilliant pool of graduate talent. We also have 10 years experience, over 10 years now, and rapidly and accurately connecting you and businesses with top graduates in the UK and globally, as we do also have our office, for those who aren't already aware, in Australia. And then a little bit more, which leads me very nicely on to introducing Nick. We do support our clients and candidates beyond the hiring process. We partnered with over 30 companies and universities in the past 6 months. And this has been on a range of topics. So for our candidates, we've done a lot of work, webinars on CV and career advice, interview tips, and looking at how they can get into different industries. And then on the client side of things, we've been doing a lot of work recently on mental fitness and mental health in the workplace. I don't know how many of you saw a webinar a couple of weeks ago. We worked with mental fitness and morning motivation with Nicola Charlotte. And in the past, we've also worked with Charlotte Wiseman. So this is the reason why we've chosen to partner with Nick today. And I am so excited to be sharing this webinar with everyone, and also being here myself with Nick. So for those who aren't already aware, Nick is one of the highest profile inspirational speakers on lived experience of mental health. Nick has worked with some absolutely incredible clients such as the NHS, the BBC, Pfizer, Harvey Nichols. There's so many more that I won't even continue to name, because I am now going to introduce you to our amazing guest speaker, Nick. Thank you so much for being here.
Wow, what a build-up. Thanks, Katie. I should hire you for every event. That's really cool. Thank you. So, hey, everyone. Thank you, Katie. So, hey, everyone. My name is Nick. I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health. First question, yes, it's a job. It's been my job for 5 years, sharing my experiences of mental illness and mental health challenges, also that adversity kind of element, but most importantly, bringing an inspirational angle to that. So that beefy title kind of explains two things, really. The lived experience piece means that I am not a medical professional. I do not give advice. I am not a solution. But what I'm very good at is to drive engagement to the well-being and mental health initiatives that are out there. Because unless you get engagement, absolutely nothing changes. The inspiration part comes from bringing in personal development techniques into the mental health arena so that we can positively impact our days. Now, what do I mean by that? It's in the definition. Mental health has a really bad rap. We kind of think it is a negative term. People will say to me, Nick, I have mental health. Absolutely you do. 100% of the planet has mental health. Whether it's good or bad, that's a whole different question. Like physical health, if we can consider mental health a muscle, absolutely separate from mental illness, but it's something we can exercise. And what can we do every single day to put ourselves in the best chance possible of being smarter, stronger, happier, more successful, whatever that means to you. It's a very subjective thing, success. But everything that I do is around forging using people's adversities. So as opposed to them defining us negatively for the rest of our days, actually using those challenges to forge something better, forge something beautiful, forge something powerful that wouldn't have existed without you going through your stuff in the first place. And for me, that's kind of where it all makes sense. And I do that through lots of different ways. And as Katie kindly alluded to, lots of different clients. And I'm actually the host of KFC TV. I'm a fried chicken host. Go figure. I've got to build for it, definitely. We'll go on to that. I work with BBC, I work with Sky, I work with lots of global media outlets to deliver a lived experience of mental health alongside the psychologists and the GPs and the medical professionals and practitioners, because we all want the same thing. We just come at things from different angles. But when we combine, it's an almighty force of positive good. I also am a mental health first aider. I encourage everybody to do that, even if it's just an awareness piece. But also an ambassador for lots of different organisations, such as Time to Change, and I signpost actively to people like Mental Health UK. I'm the agony uncle for an accounting magazine, go figure, never on the bucket list of things to do in life, but hey, what do we know? And because I do deliver my stuff globally, even pre-pandemic, I was flying all over the place doing this stuff, then we've got a real problem here in the UK especially, that we consider self-care to be selfish. Conditionally, so generationally and culturally, we've been brought up to believe that. So actually, that's why we feel guilty when we put ourselves before anything or anyone. And we really need to come away from that mindset, because it is an absolutely limiting belief. This is Tula. She's my little Shih Tzu. She really is a little Shih Tzu as well. So hopefully she's going to behave. If you hear yapping or growling, I've had my lunch. It's not me. It's going to be her. But hopefully she's going to behave. And I want to share a little bit about my story, but this isn't like an X Factor sob story. Coldplay aren't going to walk in and play Fix You in the background or anything. We kind of think that like broken people come from broken environments, and that can absolutely be true, but also it can absolutely not be true as well. You can have the right environment for success. You can have a loving family, a loving upbringing, such as I did, but stuff still goes wrong along the way. And my stuff was mental illness is in my childhood. I had obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. It was brought about by witnessing a family accident. That's for a whole different presentation altogether. But it's basically a safety mechanism gone wrong. So I would have to check gas switches and locks and light switches in sets of 3. Otherwise, the outcome would be that I would harm my family. So the one thing I will say about mental health right from the start is, mental illness right from the start is, rationality goes out the window when compulsion or obsession are thrown into the mix. So it's not simply a case of just stopping doing that. It's because actually we're trying to control the uncontrollable, and as we'll go into later on, it's a helpless pursuit. So I'm 43 now. Don't judge, I've had a hard life. More sort of Bristol Rovers fan for the football fans as well. I've got grey in the beard. So back in the day, the treatment for OCD was just 8 weeks of talking therapy. Now, I love talking therapy. I think it's so powerful. In fact, the reason why nobody could book me after 2:00 on a Friday afternoon is because that's my therapy afternoon. That's when I have my counselling. It's really important to kind of, again, it's another taboo. We don't talk about it. So, hey, there you go. Brutal honesty. You'll always get that from me. So for me, because it wasn't addressed properly, it morphed into something into my teenage life called generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. Now, statistically, that's more common, but less commonly known. Some of the signs of GAD to look for in adult life, whether it's yourself or other people, could be that you constantly catastrophize everything that you do. So you assume a negative outcome to all of your pursuits. It could be that you ruminate on your past events, relationships, mistakes, and you have these feelings of guilt and anxiety going round on loop all the time, to the extent it's if you haven't got anything to be anxious about, you'll actively look for it, which sounds absolutely nuts to people that are not familiar with GAD or high anxiety. All of these things mean that we constantly seek our accountability, our value and our worth in thoughts and opinions of other people, outside influences, the purchases of material objects in adult life, but we stay on that hamster wheel of anxiety. Now, as a speaker about the lived experience of mental health, for me, it's really important to dig down into that and say the things that solution-focused people maybe are a little afraid to say, because you need to hear the reality so that it really connects with you, with yourself and people that you know. One of those realities is this: you can run on high anxiety and high nervous energy very, very effectively, and you can be very successful doing that. But you can only run for so long until you stop. Is exactly the reason why some of the industries I work most in, construction and law, financial services, certainly this year, education and the healthcare industry, huge pressured environments where actually burnout and breakdown is rife. And even look at my school days, my kind of education, that as somebody with mental illness and mental health challenges, that school could be quite a brutal environment for a lot of people. And it's a reason why I'm mentioning this in a business context, which will come clear now, that if I think about that kind of period of my life, that my way of kind of dealing with that would be that I would learn, if I was in every clique, I would fly under the radar. I learned very early on that people pleasing was a fantastically effective mechanism. utterly destructive, but fantastically effective. The other reason is because from the outside looking in, teachers and parents, that I was top grades, head prefect in every school. So I was successful by that society tag of success. So I flew under the radar completely. But what I was trying to do was just constantly survive. It's interesting also at that age that we can label young people, young adults and children as, oh, he's a warrior, or he's sensitive, or even weirdly, he's kind or respectful. So we throw these positive slants on people that are struggling with anxiety as well, because they give themselves a way to appease other people or appease other situations. And that works, again, brilliantly, but it is destructive. And if I think about my 3 biggest challenges in adult life now, I can absolutely trace them back to my formative years, which is why as a speaker and with the coaching that I do with around speaking, it's a lot of it is around conditioning, is our kind of our belief system. And when I think about these 3 challenges now, I can absolutely trace them back to that point in time. But the first one is anxiety, of course. It's why I'm here. And for me, it's kind of recognizing that I come from an anxious family. It's not done with any cruelty or intent. It's just I have a loving family and upbringing. However, I learned from them that they react very anxiously to things. So I learned that that's how you react to stuff in life. Very kind of 0 to 60 in terms of the anxiety scale for pretty much everything that goes on. And we pick up that from other people, sometimes not very often, not with intent, but I was on a way to speak at XL London a couple of years ago, and a taxi driver said to me, we got chatting about what to do. And he said his daughter was never scared of spiders until she saw her mum was scared of spiders. Then immediately she was scared of spiders. She never actually saw the spider. She saw her mum's reaction to something on the floor. That's how easy it is that we can kind of learn these behaviors, especially at those kind of like young formative ages. The second thing that's been a biggest challenge for me in adult life, and you won't appreciate this because this really should have been in person, Katie. This should have been post-pandemic kind of thing. We'll do that. We'll definitely do that. But this is good enough right now. But I'm 6'4", 20-odd stone guy. I ain't small, but I've got a real positive association with being big. Now that comes from, as much as I love them and miss them every single day of my life, my grandparents would feed me rounds of sandwiches and say, he's a big lad. He loves his food. I am a big lad. I love my food. So for me, it's kind of like a comfort blanket that is a real positive thing for me to try and break down when I've tried to do that. So again, it's a conditioning behavior, but from a different angle. It's not always through kind of pain necessarily. And the third thing, and you've probably gotten pretty open about stuff by now, the third thing that has really been a challenge for me, but it flew completely under the radar, was I've actually got a bad relationship with alcohol. Now, again, that's an interesting one. I love interesting. It covers a whole manner of sins. That's an interesting one because I didn't realize this until early 2019. I was rushed into hospital in Bristol. I live just north of Bristol with a mega high blood pressure. It was literally off the charts. It broke their manual blood pressure machine. And the doctor said, Mr. Elston, you've got a very big heart. I said, thank you very much. He said, no, it's not a good thing. I went, oh, okay. The medication that they put me on to correct that meant I couldn't drink alcohol. It would nullify the impact of the medication. So, of course, without even thinking, I stopped drinking. And I could go weeks without drinking. I wasn't drinking every night, which is our definition of kind of alcohol abuse. What I found was, as I come away, that if I had a great day, I would want to celebrate. And if I had 1 pint, I wanted 10. And then if I had a bad day, I would do exactly the same thing, even though I could go weeks without drinking. The other element was when I was going out socially, because I had a lot of social anxiety, that I would drink before I go out anywhere because I didn't feel I was good enough a lot of the time. So I kept trying to be ahead of myself all the time. And people were saying just how much more relaxed I was and how less intense and just better company. And the good thing is I have people around me that will positively challenge me in that way and give me that honest truth. And again, this was completely under the radar, like 3, 4, 5 years into my journey, even speaking about this stuff, and stuff can still go on right now. And that's why I work on the principle, even right now, that we have all the answers we'll ever need. We just don't ask ourselves the right questions. And when we do ask ourselves the right questions, we just need to get out of our own way. Because when we start to feel defensive about things, that's exactly the things that we should be challenging. And it begins with acceptance. And for me, I've absolutely accepted that now. So it's a conscious choice not to do that. But I think certainly there's links to my kind of obsessive compulsive behavior as well, which is why I avoid things like gambling and lots of different things like that too. It's not going to be a good thing for me. So anyway, back to the story. I do this. I took that kind of ecosystem I created in education and took that into my corporate life, into my business life. I was always client facing. So sales management, account management. I was head of partnerships for a global software company. Lots of different roles, but actually anxiety and sales is not a great mix, because you're constantly, I've not heard from them in ages, or I've lost this business, and you're constantly making those kind of prejudgments about what's going on. And what I found was with the generalized anxiety disorder running in the background, I was always in earlier than I had to be, away later than I needed to be. I was always present somewhere physically, but never truly present anywhere. I was always thinking too far back or too far ahead. So I actually was never living for that day, which I've learned since is such a powerful kind of tool to use. And I was going like this every single day and running on high anxiety. And I was going to these kind of business networking meetings. I think if you've not been to a business networking meeting, the kind of loose format is this: you go along, eat some breakfast, shake some hands, sell your stuff, and go again. Kind of the format of every meeting I've been to. And I've been to I've done this literally every day as part of my role. And there was one morning in 2012 when I went to the Premier Inn in North Somerset in the southwest of the UK. Classy guy. Choose your breakdowns well. If I knew I was talking about this stuff for a living, I would have gone to Hilton or somewhere more exclusive and got a deal out of it somewhere, but it is what it is. Like Lenny Henry was nowhere to be seen. He was all over the telly with Premier Inn as well. Do you know what? I think there's two reasons I see now in audiences and clients that why people get to that point of burnout, continued burnout, and eventual breakdown, which unfortunately, sadly, only leads one way. I'm seeing it more now with the compound effect of lockdown and the pandemic. I think that the two main things for me is masking behavior. So I would try and be what people wanted to see in me. I would try and be what situations demanded of me, but I sure wouldn't damn show myself. Because when I showed myself, my narrative said I'll be shot at, I'll be dismissed, they won't like me, they won't love me. Very much a kind of a people-pleasing mechanism to that, especially being client-facing too. So we don't show ourselves, we don't talk about mental health, we don't talk about lots of different sensitive things. And what I've since done with fear, it's very much false evidence appearing real, the dangers and the assumptions I'll come on to later on. But masking behavior is a different mask for everything. I was a different person at home than I was with my friends, different person with my friends than I was at work, but none of them were me, because I was always trying to mirror what people wanted to see in me. I was never truly being myself and showing any authenticity or indeed any vulnerability come to that as well. Second reason why people get to that point in time, humor me, try this. If you get your diary out now, get your calendar out now, is there a part of your day that's exclusively ring-fenced for you to rest, recover, and recharge just 30 minutes so that you can go again strong tomorrow? I bet you there isn't. You'll fill your work day up with all your work stuff. We kind of need to do that. Bills need to be paid. Last time I checked with the mortgage company, they didn't get paid on dreams and missions. However, we give the rest of our time away to whoever shouts loudest. We never prioritize ourselves. Self-care is selfish, remember that mentality. So actually, if you're doing that, where do you actually feature in your own life? What is this all about if we're not actually giving ourselves that time every day? Just 30 minutes, you're worth 30 minutes a day, surely, to rest and recover. And we'll come on to that later on. So I left that Premier Inn on that morning, and I'd done that thing like back in the days when we could shake hands, say, how are you? Yeah, I'm great, thanks. How are you? It wasn't, but we don't say that. And I sat in the car and I basically started to shut down. It's like a machine shutting down. I started to sob. I'd lost hope, or the hope of something better. I couldn't see any change coming after decades of kind of living with mental illness, and as life went on, mental health conditions as well. And I think that's the most dangerous point that people can reach, is when they do lose that kind of hope. Become quite a dark place for a lot of people. And without getting too dark about it, it was either going to consume me or I had to let it out. Because a lot of people think that breakdown is quite an angry thing. It could be, but for me, it wasn't. Actually, like I said, it was the worst thing about that time was feeling absolutely nothing at all. Because to cut off feeling hate, I cut off feeling love, to cut off feeling bad, I cut off feeling good. You can't have one without the other. So you actually end up living in a self-contained numbness. It's not a great place to be when you can't feel anything. And it's, for the Harry Potter fans in the room, it was like the boggart in the cupboard, like the thing that you kept in for so long, your biggest fear. What would it look like if all 6'4", 20-odd stone of alpha male started speaking about mental illness and mental health? And I just saw that as my only way forward. I'd never done anything like it before. So 2 weeks later, I turned up at the same meeting and I told 20 people, 18 people in the room exactly what happened 2 weeks before. Still don't know where that came from. Just felt like a universal kick up the behind. I haven't sworn yet, which is really good for me. I'm being respectful of Katie, that's why. So there was certainly that element. And I shared that. And if I'm honest, I think it was going to be a blaze of glory mic drop moment. It's going to be like Death by Police you see in the movies kind of thing. I was going to say my bit, then off I go. And absolutely, that day changed my life forever, because everybody in that room queued up to give me their support afterwards, like unreservedly, without judgment, just did that. And I didn't think, especially in 2012, a man speaking about this wasn't a thing. The second thing was everybody in that room queued up to give me a hug. I love hugs. There's 20 odd stone of hugging power going missing here during the lockdown. It's crazy. And the third thing that certainly was my real sliding doors moment, and is driven me ever since, it suddenly wasn't about me anymore. Because what was a really selfish move, and actually there are times in your life where you need to be selfish, there's certain times when no one's going to do this for you. What turned out to be a really kind of a real dynamic shift, I guess, because everybody started sharing their stuff with me. People aren't used to hearing like brutal honesty, has since been labelled as, or the absolute truth. And what I found is the truth is liberating. It builds a bridge of trust between you and your audience, whether that's one person or 10,000 people. People feel you. They never necessarily remember what you say. It's about how you make people feel. And I suddenly make people feel that it was okay to talk about this stuff a long time before it was socially okay to say about this stuff. But it wasn't just about mental illness. It was about people started talking about sexuality and gender and race and grief and abuse and loss, all these things that we carry that we just don't talk about. And it was then that I saw the power in being able to deliver this message to help get people. It's kind of like people are waiting for permission to reach out for help sometimes. Help people, take people on that journey to speak to the amazing solutions and initiatives that are in place. That's never going to be me. I made a very early call on this. I never wanted to be a solution bringer because I felt the gap was getting people to the door of the people that can help them. And then I've done the best that I can do. And then I started to speak more and more. The rooms got bigger. The audiences got bigger. I started flying all over the place doing this stuff, and it's got crazy. I think the first stage gig I did in front of thousands of people, I went, this is nuts, as the first line of a conference. Really, really cool. Something I use called disarming truth. I'm never afraid to tell people what's on my mind, right, even if it's not the done thing. The same conference actually said that, do you know what? I'm really anxious right now. Like, who the hell wouldn't be? I'm just about to bare my soul to 8,000 accountants, that kind of thing. By giving people the truth, they can deal with that. And unless you're showing the world your true self, how do you expect the world to engage with you? I think that's the problem. We're holding back. We're waiting for permission. Certainly over the last year, I mean, it's given you some context now. So context is massive. And without context, people won't tune into anything you say. And it's a really important thing to remember in life and business, whether your audience is one person or 10,000 people. Give people the reason why you're there in front of them delivering your message. Give them that agenda. So over the past year, I've certainly experienced a huge different shift in content because it's been different times, of course. What I found is, though, some of the old rules really rock around this. So this 3-step process in front of you was actually a process that I use as part of my recovery for my breakdown, for my mental illness. Acknowledge, survive, and evolve. But this also formed the basis of kind of surviving my business over the past year as well. So let's shift emotional state a second. Let's use the business as an example, give you a bit of a break from the emotional stuff. So in March last year, when lockdown was first announced, my business, really successful business, was wiped out overnight because all of my stuff was done in person. Speaking, coaching, whatever I was doing, everything was in person. It's not a sob story because everyone's got their different challenges. However, for me, a lot of people are still in that mode. They're still kind of hiding, waiting to sit this one out. And it just doesn't work that way. I think we all know people in life and in business who kind of taken that approach and sadly may not be around anymore in a professional sense. So this 3-step process, wherever you are, whatever challenge you're experiencing right now, whatever's really bothering you, use this to come away from that point. Because the problem we have at the moment is we don't know what the end looks like still. We don't even know what when the end's going to be yet. We know hopefully when it's going to be. So that is impacting our goals, it's impacting our aspirations, it's impacting our hopes. So if we haven't got that, if we're bigger picture players in business, we like to know where we're going, start with the end in mind, all those kind of things. But if we don't know what that looks like, how do we get momentum to create change? Easy. And it comes back to acceptance. We need to acknowledge exactly where we are right now. Everything that you've ever done, everything you've ever said and ever been has led to exactly where you are right now. And that's gone. So we need to accept exactly where we are, even if it's in a position that we don't want to be, even if we're in a place we don't want to be. Just the acknowledgement of that means that you can start to get the momentum to come away from that point in time. So wherever you are, whatever you're anxious about, whatever you're worried about, whatever causing you pain, acknowledge it immediately right now. And as soon as you do that, you can move on to survival mode. So I had to acknowledge very early on in March last year, this is going to be brutal. In every sense, this is going to be brutal. So in terms of survival, how that looked for me in my example was this: how long could I last without the income? Great question. How long could I last without any heart medication? Because it's imported. I didn't know if that was going to be affected. Again, great question. All these things that we had a tick box things of what we need to survive. Eggs, flour, and toilet rolls were high on the agenda as well for a lot of people. Once you've got that kind of survival list and how long you can survive exactly where you are, even if you're in a place that you don't want to be, then you've got the kind of structure of a goal. You've got the structure of a project, because then you've got a time frame. So you've worked out, you've got the momentum, you've got the time frame, right, evolution. How do we evolve to the current reality? Because let's face it, how we lived and worked this time last year is very different and may not even work today. But the reality is, how we live and work today may be completely different in 3 months' time again. That's how good we need to get with change. That's why everything that I now kind of focus on is around that kind of resilience piece, is being able to work out the things that we can influence, the things that we can change, but most importantly, the things that we can't influence and the things that we can't change. So some of these things that we can have an influence over, I think, look, we cannot control the uncontrollable. We cannot control pandemics. We cannot control other people, what they say, what they do, as much as we would love to sometimes. The pursuit of trying to control the uncontrollable will create extra anxiety beyond anything you're experiencing right now. What we do have control over is our thoughts and our actions and how we proactively choose to go into each and every day. Now, those things can be tainted by experiencing mental health challenges because it affects our sense of belonging. We don't feel we can hope or aspire to be any better than where we are and who we are right now. So the first thing we sacrifice when we struggle, even with things like low self-esteem, low self-confidence, the first thing we sacrifice is choice. But choice is the only thing we have. How we proactively choose to go into each and every day. We cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we react. We can build our playbook to know how we bounce back. And that kind of Groundhog Day that we're all experiencing, especially over the past year, can actually be turned in our favor if we start to set some really healthy boundaries. So again, look at your day, because your day is going to look different to anybody else's day, and especially when it take into account your unique likes and loves and what you love and what you hate and I love country music, but it depresses the hell out of a lot of people. So that plays a big part in kind of motivating me. There we go. So it's going to be different for a lot of people. So boundaries could be something as simple as this, that there's an amazing commencement speech by an American naval commander who speaks about the importance of making your bed. Google it. I never remember his name. He says that if you wake up in the morning and make your bed, not only have you achieved something straight away, whatever rubbish happens to you that day, you've got a nice, neat bed to go back to. And there's something in that. It's what sports coaches call marginal gains. It's stacking the odds in our favor. Daily, consistent, incremental changes to start to kind of put ourselves in that position of a bigger picture win. And the boundaries is exactly where it's at. So other boundaries could be very simple. It could be around your working hours. Obviously, that's a very common theme. I know for a lot of people, those boundaries are really great, that they're actually, that it's just all flowing into one another. So we have control. We have a certain amount of control, at the very least, of how our day looks and how we can do things. So some things I could have implemented, 5-minute buffer zones at least between phone calls. I've done half an hour breaks in between longer meetings, Zoom meetings maybe, and I've put 1 or even 2 hour breaks between engagements such as this, because it allows me time to recharge in between and it regulates my energy throughout the day. So we have an element of control over these things. Now, setting boundaries is all well and good, but unless you communicate those boundaries to the people that it matters, so it could be your clients, it could be your colleagues, it could be your team, it could be your friends, your family. You can set all the boundaries you want, but unless you communicate those boundaries to other people, their expectations of you don't change. So a very simple example, if your response time pre-pandemic to an email was 4 hours, and now for whatever reason it's 8 hours, unless you communicate that change to your client, their expectation doesn't change. So it still creates the same anxiety, if not more, because you are feeling under pressure all the same. So have that courage to actually communicate your boundaries Because a lot of the time we don't do this because we don't have that courage and conviction and confidence in ourselves because it's been affected by our mental health at that point. Some of the other things to think about on this was my work as an agony uncle. So a lot of the letters I was getting from the accountancy space, that was Boris and Rishi would announce the latest tax breaks, the latest initiatives. And as soon as the press conference finished, they're on the phone to the accountant saying, how do I apply for that? Because their expectation is they should know immediately. So unless we manage these expectations in business, in our roles, whatever you are, that's really mindful. Expectations need to be managed for your boundaries to be healthy. So don't be afraid to do that. This is Mark Twain, not Albert Einstein, as a lot of people think. So paraphrasing, some of the worst things in my life never actually happened. Anyone relate to that? I bet a lot of us do. There's so much danger and assumption right now. So much danger. Like I said, if we don't know what the end looks like or what the end's going to be, actually, who are we to kind of assume that? Because we'll leave that to the professionals. If you watch Sky News on repeat for 24 hours, 99% is speculation, 1% is fact. But it will have an impact on your mental health. And this is what we need to be really mindful of, is it fact or is it story? And I love this bit. This bit is such a big thing for me at the moment. If you think about anything that you're anxious about right now, anything that's stressing you, anything, whatever, personal, professional, whatever that may be, is it fact or is it the story you're telling yourself about that situation? So I work with schools and colleges and universities as well, also prisons. Prison's easier than school sometimes, trust me. Now I had a school talk I was doing a couple of weeks ago, and a girl said through the chat box, she said, what makes her really anxious is when she messages her friend and a friend doesn't message her back. Okay, that's not what makes her anxious. What makes her anxious is the story that she's then telling herself. She's been rejected. She's not loved. They've fallen out. She's angered her. All these things that were created. And by the end of a session, she actually heard back from her friend as well. She put in the chat box. It's crazy. But we'll do that. It's a really small example, but we can all set our own challenges, our own anxieties to that example. And if something is fact, if there's genuinely something going on right now, which is a fact, it's not driven by an emotion that you're attaching to it, we can deal with fact. We can step up, we can confront it, whatever it takes. But also when it comes to the story, we can certainly change our narrative around that by bringing it back into that question, is it fact or is it story? The best way I can showcase this to you in the amount of time given, one of the things that I did as part of my own recovery from breakdown was I started to keep, it's going to sound weird, but go with me. It's free and it's fun. It's fluffy, but it's free and it's fun. I kept a worry journal. I wrote down a diary of everything that made me highly anxious or the byproducts of anxiety, the symptoms. So things like defensive behavior, aggressive behavior, sensitivity, lethargy, lack of energy, lots of different things that are usually assumption-based as well. Now, on day one, there was 128 entries. Welcome to GAD. Now, I checked in on that day one 2 weeks later, and of those 128 entries, none of them happened. But that day, 128 times, I created anxiety about stuff that never happened. I damaged myself spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally about stuff that didn't happen. We do that. Anxiety is created in the assumed outcome. It's regret from the past or fear of the future. It's very rarely is it in the day. And the stuff that is in the day is usually fact. It's usually the stuff that's right in front of us right now. I think the problem is for me that I lived too much in the past, or I lived too much looking ahead. I never lived for today. And it's certainly something that I've changed now. But be careful that what you're talking about is not a story. It's actually fact. This has also been a great time to check in on other people, definitely, but check in on yourself as well. I think this enforced distance we've had from reality, for every negative, there's also been a lot of positives as well. I mean, 80% of my life has been reclaimed from not traveling. And that meant I've got 80% of my life to reinvest in things like self-care. I mean, my dog's going to be really, really lonely when they go back out into the world again. She's got used to having me around all the time now. She's fit as she's ever been. But the point is that the stronger I've become by doing that, the more the negative has jumped out. And that's a really interesting one as well, because a lot of people think this is just them experiencing it. So I'm a really stable, consistent guy in terms of relationships and friendships. But over the last year, I've lost friends. And not in a fatal way, but just friends have gone. And I've also gained friends. It's been quite turbulent in that way. A lot of people, once I've said this bit in a talk, a lot of people say, yeah, me too, I thought it was just me. It's not. people are acting in different ways. Everyone's having a slightly different experience to anybody else in this situation. A lot of people are acting from a position of fear, for sure. It could be temporary. However, sometimes people have gone more tribal. They've become more insular. They become more kind of family oriented. So whatever changes are going on, again, it comes back to acceptance. And actually, I guarantee you, for the vast majority of the times, it's not going to be about you, it's going to be about them. But we can take it very, very personally. So again, it comes back to fact and story again, always. Another thing that I've checked in on is social media, that is now called doom scrolling, got a whole term for it. But I came away, I had a really huge following on social media in March last year, and I just left. Because what I found was that with the stronger I felt, there was kind of a groundswell of toxicity kind of happening and relationships falling out on social media, and not even mine, just watching this go through on a timeline kind of thing. And there was some really bad stuff happening. You had like kind of racism and bad politics and lots of different things that's going on in the world. And actually, I just decided I'm out. And sometimes it takes that kind of stand. And I'm not saying never. I'm actually thinking about kind of dipping my toe back in again shortly. But the point is, it's not social media that's the problem. It's our immersion. Because I know when I've been at my lowest over the past year, because this is not a hallelujah, he's cured. I manage my stuff daily. So when I'm at my lowest, I know sometimes I can be really kind of fall into that trap of not choosing well how I immerse my attention. And Harvard did a study that between 18 and 29-year-olds, social media was the biggest source of anxiety as a trigger. However, in the same survey with the same demographic, it was the biggest source of positive community for mental health. So it's not the platforms at all. It's our immersion. And sometimes if you're not feeling strong enough to immerse well, try just pausing the account, hiding the account temporarily and coming away for a bit, have a bit of a detox. Lots of different things you could check in. It looks different for you than it does everybody else. Fans of Lost, I'm showing my age here, because actually this is older than I thought it was. Fans of Lost will know about The Others. Right, okay. Who looks after the people that looks after people? If you have a responsibility for people, whether you are an HR manager, an employer, whoever you may be watching this right now, or you have friends, you have family, we have responsibilities to other people, but that can really be quite skewed the wrong way. For me, it's not about how can we help people right now. Actually, for me, it's how can't we help people right now? That is so powerful, that question, because it's a human flaw wrapped in the kindness that we feel the need to fix anybody that comes to us. Now, unless we're a medical professional, we cannot fix anybody, myself included. I have hundreds of these conversations every week, because I give the upfront contract that I am not here to fix you. I'm not here to be a solution, but I certainly want to listen to you. I certainly want to signpost you the best way I can. So let me talk you away a different way of doing this. Because if you've got a team of 30 people, you've got 31 people's burdens on your shoulders before you even go home. That's a reality of the situation. When I've been writing for HR Director and HR Zone recently, it's been very much around this element. That's the whole piece, is the people that are really experiencing the burden at the moment are the people in responsibility positions of other people, leadership positions. So let's look at it this way. If somebody comes to you in whatever capacity, then firstly, that's a massive well done. They've got the trust and rapport with you that they will open up about something which is really sensitive to them. It may not be mental health, mental illness. It could be, like I said, anything to do with any sensitive subject. But that's huge. But there is a responsibility. The responsibility is this, that there's three things really. The first thing is that it could potentially be the only time they decide to open up to anybody. That's the reality of the matter. So there is a huge responsibility, but your responsibility is still not to fix them. Your responsibility is to actively listen, because actually when you do listen, people will never give you what's going on up front. It will be the second time of answering that they will usually give you more of the truth. They will come to you about the byproduct. They will come to you about defensive behavior, aggression, all the things I listed earlier on. And finally, the reason why we need to listen is because we need to really put our devices away and truly engage with how they would like to be helped if they are asking for help. In my experience, 90% of the time, essentially in life, people just want to be heard and they want to be understood. Simple. We overcomplicate it. And again, 90% of the time, they will find their own way forward once you've actually had that conversation. You feel empowered to create positive change. I did. But for the rest of the 10%, your responsibility is still not to fix them. It's to actively signpost. What do I mean by that? So what I mean is that this is what I do as a role. I increase engagement in mental health initiatives if you are part of a bigger organization, I always suggest kind of signposting internally first, weirdly, unless somebody is at a point of crisis. Excuse me. And the reason being is this: internally, you'll have a faster access usually to help, unless there's a private or trusted partner route I'll come on to in a second. Medically, if somebody is at a point of crisis, absolutely they need medical attention as soon as humanly possible. Beyond that, did you know that the NHS have an amazing bank of resources on their website that helps people in lots of different situations, different groups, I didn't know that. It's hardly ever promoted or shared. So that link, all of these links and more actually on my website, and all these are not commercially driven. I do not receive a bean from referring anything to anyone. That's not the way I work. I'm very morally driven. All of these are because I trust these organizations. I have a kind of a partnership or a relationship, sorry, it's better, with that organization. Trusted partners, I've built a bank of trusted partners that I work with, people that I've either used personally or that I've referred to successfully. But if you haven't got those bank of trusted partners, I've mentioned the BACP here because at the very least through the BACP, you will have accreditation. But actually from somebody from a lived experience perspective, when it comes to counselling, then I certainly suggest culture is key. Most of these practitioners and therapists will give you a discovery call, or however they want to describe that, a free call. And it's a real barrier for people that are struggling, because actually they think that if they make this call, they're suddenly in therapy. But if you can actually say you're just having a call with one person to discuss how you are with no obligation or anything else, that makes it a lot safer. So all this kind of stuff, get good at knowing. Mind Mental Health UK, Time to Change, lots of different organizations that have downloadable materials. They have people to support you, courses, and lots of different things. Get good at knowing this stuff. And I've also made it a passion. So I live just north of Bristol. So I've built relationships with local organizations that work with student mental health, Black and ethnic minority community, LGBTQ community, domestic abuse charities, communities that I'm not part of, but actually people that speak to me maybe. So I want to empower myself to have more conversations because I don't feel the burden of trying to fix everybody. And it's exactly the same with you guys as well. The better you feel, the more you have this process in place, the more conversations you have, and fantastic culture spreads from that point. And when it comes to engagement, so as I said, I kind of joked earlier on, I work with KFC. KFC is a great example of a client because they have a workforce which is office, factory, and retail, lots of different things that are work 24 hours round the clock. So actually live events may not be the right way to approach them. So even as a speaker, there's lots of different formats I deliver in. When it comes to engagement, it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about engaging on their terms, engaging on your team's terms, not your terms. And I think that's a real mindset shift from the way we've traditionally been taught to do business, that people need to fall in with what we want to do. Actually, my insight would be that we need to look at it the other way around. So with the 24-hour workforce, the best way that I did, I created KFC TV, which is a video podcast series. We picked different subjects, things like grief. I mean, grief's a huge challenge. I mean, I haven't got time to go into that right now. Grief's a huge challenge at the moment, and not necessarily grief attached to a loss of human life. It's loss to a way of life. There's a huge element of grief right now. So by putting this TV show together, like a video podcast together, we reached everybody as much as we can with a greater depth. And let's face it, mental health stuff, and the reason why mental health initiatives and stuff are not often very well engaged with is because it's heavy and it can be dry. I'm not going to dress it up, so it can be really dry. So we need to make it fun to engage. We want to make it that people would choose to do this in their free time. I would choose to engage. So what I do is, as part of the show, is to, of course, bring on a medical professional and we'll talk about it, have that lived experience angle, but then I'll bring somebody who does something fun on, like a laughter yoga guy or something, and just really start to shake it up a bit so people choose to engage with that. And that's what it's about, engaging on their terms and create something that people want to engage with. And when it comes to recovery, look, I'm not the guy to talk about nutrition or mindfulness or meditation. All those things play a big part of my life, but I'm not the expert on that. I said I'm never going to try and be the expert in something I'm not. Recovery to me needs to be simpler than that. For 30 minutes a day, do something that you love to do. That's it. That's as difficult as it gets, because fans of personal development will recognize this. People that have been on diets will recognize this, that every book you read, everything that you watch, every plan you look at makes you feel that if you don't do it my way, you're a rubbish human being. That's kind of a default setting it makes you feel. So if we're going to do that, break it down, build your own playbook. If there's one line that really jumps out of you of this talk, write that in your own playbook. I've got my own playbook right here. That's what I preach. My playbook here. If I hear something, if I read something, go straight in the book. That's my playbook. So when I'm not feeling life right now, if I woke up tomorrow morning and thought, oh, screw this, I've got a playlist. I've got a playbook of stuff to go to. So do something that you love to do, simple as that. But certainly look at things like sleep, nutrition, hydration, and movement and exercise and all the great things we know. But I'm not your guy on that. You can go and find that stuff yourself. And again, links on the website and stuff. The other element of this is how we form emotional attachments. We form emotional attachments to everything. But sometimes we can start to use this in our favor. So if you've ever been driving along or walking along and songs come on and you just burst out crying, or you've burst out laughing, you've got, it's in neuro-linguistic programming terms, they call emotional anchors, that we form these things to people and situations and events that have gone before, and it can take us straight back. Music is very powerful as well. I'll probably come on to that in a second, actually. But what I want to really tune into right now, think about that one job you wanted to do as a kid. Pop it in the chat box if you wanted. What was that one job that you really wanted to do as a kid? The one you were emotionally tuned into? I asked this question all over the world, and the top two answers are astronaut, followed by archaeologist. There's an Indiana Jones generation coming through from me. So there is certainly that element. But an astronaut, if you think about the job of being an astronaut, is rubbish. You get trained for 10 years, shot up into the sky for a week, shot back down with a high risk of death. Probably wouldn't sign up for that. But think about that job through the eyes of a teenager before adulting had to be done and mortgages had to be paid and kids had to be fed and everything else. That you got travel and discovery and excitement and adventure. You'd do that. You'd apply for that all the time. So think about what you want it to be and tune into that why. Because if you're not thinking that way now, there's a part of your soul that's really crying out for that in your downtime, in your hobbies, in your recovery time, whatever you want to call that thing that you should do every day to help you recharge. I've been very fortunate to deliver talks to the NHS Frontline Conference 5 times over the past year. The one thing that's really stood out for me is that perspective thing. Again, it could be a little bit of a British thing that we do as well. But we do this thing, well, who am I to worry about this when they've got this going on? Actually, it doesn't work that way. If something causes you pain and frustration, no matter how small it is, you've got every right to sort it out for yourself. Because actually, when I've been speaking to those guys, despite the huge pressures that they have right at the coalface of what's going on, actually, most of them are managing just as effectively as the local residential homes I've donated time to talk to them. But another interesting thing in terms of emotion, when I speak to the guys at the residential homes who have lived decades, combination of decades and hundreds and thousands of years on the planet as a total, the only thing that they ever say that they regret is not doing what they used to do as a kid. They used to sing and they stopped singing. They used to dance and they stopped dancing. Out of decades on this planet each, that's the only thing that they regret. So really tune into what you were about when you were growing up. What did you love? What do you have a passion for? I know for Christmas, my nephew got Lego and I played with it more than he did. It really took me back. So just think about stuff. It's really nice to have a think about. Mental health kind of stuff and material can be quite heavy. I try and shake it up a little bit and try and think of a different way. Try and think of a different way to engage yourself. So think of it as a blank sheet of paper. And when it comes to emotional connections, we can really start to work this in our favor. So as a big country music fan, would have got started by now anyway. But when it comes to this, I have what I call my walk-on music. So if I'm doing stage events, I very often do stadium events or conference hall events where there's a proper AV staff and they put walk-on music and things. So my walk-on music is not country, actually, because it goes further back than that. My walk-on music is an old tune by The Automatic called Monster. What's that coming over the hill? Is it a monster? That one. There's a whole reason why that is, but I'm not going to go into it now. But when I hear that song, I am primed to do something. My energy lifts. I've got an emotional attachment to that song. Also, when I come off of stage, especially from big stage events where it's a real rush, I've got a playlist of slower music which manages my state back down. You all have the power to do this. Build a playlist of music which motivates you. In fact, let's do it. Sorry if I'm going to screw up the chat box here, but let's do it anyway. Right, I am now the MC of O2 Arena. 20,000 people have paid their hard-earned money to come and hear you do your thing, whatever your thing is. I don't want to ask. I'm just about to announce you. I'm just about to call you to stage. what would your walk-on music be? Think about that one track that really motivates you. Actually, if you put the song name and the artist in the chat box, if Katie could send me the list, I'll put a playlist together for you all. So you can distribute that and you can play it whenever you need motivation. So what would your walk-on music be?
I love this
Well, the
idea.
song name and the artist name. Should we do that?
Yeah, I reckon so. We had
Cool.
some ones already. Thunderstruck, AC/DC, Billy Joel, Piano Man.
Thunderstruck is right up there. Every list I've ever done for people. This is an exercise I do at the Speaking Academy. You get some really great tracks. The weirdest one was a Benny Hill theme tune for those old enough to remember. But that's a whole different story again. Anyway, so yeah, whilst I'm talking, think about that, pop it in the chat box. I want the song name and the artist name. What would your walk-on music be for when people pay their hard-earned money to come and hear you deliver?
We've got some great ones coming through. Thanks everyone that's sending them in. Keep going, because we will be making this playlist and we can send it round after the session. I love that.
Cool. Good stuff. No, you're welcome. So, right. One other thing to throw into, well, there's lots of other things, but for now, one other thing to throw into the mix. There's an American author called Jim Rohn, R-O-H-N, for those making notes, who says you are the average of the 5 people that you spend most of your time with. Now, I can probably extend that a little bit further, depending on your kind of circles. You are the average. So are you happy with that? If we are a product of our environment, are you happy with being the average of the people that you surround yourself with the most? His rationale behind that is if you've got a group of 5 friends and one of them is highly aggressive, the group will raise their aggression to meet that or kind of resent it so much that it will change towards a negative mindset of the group. So again, I'm not going to add, if there's any divorces that happen from this, I was never here, Katie, take me off the bidding, but just have a think about that. Like, if you are the product of your environment, are you happy with your environment? And when you do start to take stuff on, like especially something quite big and hairy and scary, marginal gains all the way, daily incremental, consistent changes to start to stack the odds in your favor. Neurologically, it takes between 21 and 28 days for a new habit to start to form strong enough to start to replace your old conditioning. And that certainly was my experience and the experience of many people I've spoken to. It may take a lot longer for some people. It depends how you learn and stuff, but that can be done. And wherever you are right now and however you're feeling, you are never, ever done. Absolutely. Because sometimes we feel that. You think, oh, I'm out. I'm done with this. I'm done with him. I'm done with her. I'm done with it. Whatever that may be, you're never, ever done. Sometimes we feel like that. I think sometimes the moment we're living can define us, especially over the past year. We certainly found that compounded a lot more. But the power is always in the comeback. Now, this picture I'm showing here is XL London. It was actually the event I mentioned earlier on. That 5 years before this picture was taken, I was being taken out of here by St. John's ambulance after having a panic attack at a trade conference. Now, I wasn't even speaking. I was trying to walk around the stands nicking goodie bags whilst the sales guys weren't looking. We've all been there, don't judge. And this poor soul just caught my eye, and it's right in my worst times, and I just went. But within 5 years, I was booked to keynote here in front of these people in my own right. Now, that one difference in that period of 5 years, this is going to sound glib. A lot of people won't tune into this, but I promise you it's the truth if you start to work on it. We can reprogram ourselves. So what changed was my self-narrative. Because when I would go to events like this, I could never do that. I could certainly never do that. Social anxiety, I'm not thin enough, I'm not good looking enough, I'm not rich enough, I'm not... Whatever that was, I was always coming from a position of talking myself into a losing game. We need to really change that behavior. We need to start to talk ourselves into a winning game. We can start to do that, and there's lots of ways to do that. I'm sure there's going to be coaches on the call as well. Things like affirmations, things like mantras, whatever you're into. Really, there's a different way to do it. But basically, what we're trying to do for the techies, like the Matrix, they love this, is we reprogram ourselves. We start to talk ourselves into that winning game, and it's not an overnight thing. Absolutely not an overnight thing. But I changed my language from I can never do that to I could do that. And then I could do that turned to I can do that. And then that turned to it's tomorrow. Oh my God, what am I going to do? That's the process that you take yourself on. And it's unreal. The best things that have ever happened to me have been by accident. The best things that have ever happened to me have come from my worst times. So don't let whatever's gone before define who you are right now and who you're going to be. You just never know. And of course, I got to finish with a country music quote. And if you are into country music, Gary Allan, check it out. Every storm runs out of rain. I love that. I think we need to know that right now. I think Every storm you've ever been through, you've at least survived because you're here. Most of the time we thrive. Most of the time we evolve. Most of the time we learn. Despite the most brutal and horrendous of lessons it teaches us along the way, something better can come from this. It can forge something beautiful, something powerful, something stronger than happened before. I know people that have been through truly horrendous situations, some actually unfathomable for most of us, those situations. We haven't got that power to go back. What we have got the power to do is create something better and use that energy as a force for good. It does take the same energy to destroy us as it does to act as a great catalyst to go forward. People that have launched charities and raised money and awareness on the back of some horrendous and hideous things that people experience. So for me, it's not kind of said, it's really coming back to that every storm does run out of rain. This will pass, as everything else has ever passed. And sometimes it's not you that needs to do that, but if it's somebody that comes to you, just remember your role is not to fix them. That's the most important message for people that have responsibility right now. Your role is not to fix anybody. Your role is to listen. Your role is to signpost. And if you are a practitioner, great, fix them. But just recognize that. Give them that message of hope, because as I said, it's when people lose hope or the hope of something better, that's where it starts to become quite a dangerous place for a lot of people. So that's me. I'm going to come back to the room now to see if you have any questions. However, given the sensitivity of the subject, I do appreciate that confidentials could be better. So my email address is nick@nickelston.com. Please do reach out. I'm really happy to hear from anybody who has any questions about today. Website is now launched. On that, the most important part is the need help section. Lots of resources constantly being added to, and all of them are people that I have great relationships with, people that I personally trust. They are never, ever commercially driven. Really important to recognize that, because I think sometimes people can use that in the wrong way. And I have a YouTube channel. It's becoming increasingly more active. Now I've got my act together. Now I've got 80% of my life back. I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect. And also the Forge Ahead Show podcast will go out very soon, within the next 2 weeks, where I'm going to be bringing you some great names from stage and screen stuff and having a chat with them. So stay tuned for that one too. And that's me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Katie. I'll hand over to you if there are any questions. Thanks for joining my open therapy session.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was absolutely amazing. I loved it. I think my favourite bit was when everyone got so involved talking about what songs they wanted. I thought this playlist.
It's a great exercise.
Yeah, you know, it's going to be so motivating. Maybe I should start listening to that in the morning. So thank you for bringing that to everyone. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone who did send in their questions. I'm quite conscious of time, so we're probably only going to answer a few. But as Nick mentioned, if you do have any more, please do drop him a message, or you can message me or the team at Give a Grad a Go for any other inquiries as well. So someone sent in earlier at the beginning of the session that they feel guilt about having anxiety and mental health issues. And yeah, and they said, I mean, that must be so common. And they've asked specifically, do you have any tools or techniques, I guess, in addition to what you've already told us today, that might be helpful?
As you've probably worked out by now, I'm very open. And the reason why I kind of side them was because it's not necessarily because I hear that a lot. I don't actually hear that a lot, because it's one of those things that people tend to hide. So I appreciate the question, but absolutely resonates with me. Especially, I'm not sure if the person that asked the question would also experience things like imposter syndrome as well. That can be really tied to guilt when it comes to our experiences like that have gone. In January was when I kind of resumed counselling and therapy. It was kind of, I wanted to use it as a proactive thing. And one of the first things that we had to address was this overwhelming and constant, sometimes at varying levels and volumes, feeling of guilt. And the reason why I use the keyword acceptance a lot now, if you see me speak a few times, you'll recognize there's certain things that I say a lot of the time is because I need to validate that by sharing that with people. I still use this as kind of therapy space in a way. And for me, for the person that asked that question, just notice actually you said yes, he does. For the person that asked that question, it comes down to acceptance. Acceptance of the good, acceptance of the bad, and actually, because the one thing that I've been really open with you now, I've never shared this with anybody. So one thing I've really had a problem with is the fact that phrase that people always say, well, you always did the best you could with the best you had and that kind of stuff. I didn't, if I'm honest. And I think that's the bit that really gets to me, but you still need to accept that. And I said, there are lessons in everything for sure, but I would strongly recommend, I'm really happy to have a chat with this person, by the way. I lost the name now. Chat box is closed. Paul. Yeah, Paul. If you want to grab a chat away from here, really happy to. But for me, it was counselling. I chose a route of counselling which was more challenging, so a little bit more confrontational, because the counselling I had before wasn't, and that worked well at that time. What I needed now was somebody to make me defensive all the time, because I know that's the bit that gets to me. So Paul, absolutely, let's grab a call. The short answer to your question for anybody else interested in this is acceptance. That's really, really difficult, and it's something I'm still working on. Thank you. I didn't expect to go there.
Yeah. No, thanks. We've got a couple more questions. Sorry, I just had to stop sharing the screen there so you can see them.
No worries. And John's another country fan.
Yay! Someone's asked, how would you become a mental health first aider? I know there's a few different avenues, isn't there? So
there is. I mean, it's actually it's widely accessible now. So I trained with a lady called Paula from Black Dog. She's based in the southwest where I am. But there's lots of trainers. I know an organisation I spoke for yesterday, Western College in North Somerset. They do mental health first aid training now as well. So I would probably suggest speaking to your local college first, or through the mental health first aid. MHFA England website. They usually have a list of people by region that are accredited to deliver that. So yeah, MHF, I don't know what their exact website is, MHFA England. If you could Google that, that'd be great. I'm presuming in England, but
probably.
Yeah.
No, that's great, thank you. And someone else has asked, this follows very nicely on from that question. They are one of the mental health first aiders in their company, and they've asked if you've got any advice for the best support that the company or them as the mental health first aiders could actively put in place for the employers who might be worried about the transition going from working from home and then coming back into the office, which will be quite soon.
Okay, cool. So again, thank you, Robin, for the question. You are one of the people actually that I kind of worry about's the wrong word, care for the most, I guess. Is you are one of those people that the reason why people become mental health first aiders is either because they have a passion for mental health, or actually they have their own experiences, either personally or through their own circles, of people who've had mental health challenges. Both of those default settings are that you become more sensitive in supporting other people, because I would guess you are somebody who is easily approachable and somebody to share with. So there's certainly a self-protection element. So I say this guidedly, but vulnerability is a great way to go. So this isn't about making kind of blanket decisions on how people are feeling. And again, I could send you the link to the HR director article I did. It's about having human-to-human conversations. So accepting that not everybody is going to be having the same experience. There's some people that are going to have to be prized out of their house. There are some people that will, like, as soon as you open the office door, they'll be like straight in, and everywhere in between. So recognizing that everyone's having a different experience of this, but actually use your characteristics. And again, this is a generalism. I'm taking a leap here. Use your skill set to deliver some vulnerability. So share with them, actually, I understand how you feel, but what would be best for you? How would you see this best working for you? Now, if there are some givens, as in they have to go back to the office, then again, it's just about how you can then manage that effectively on their terms. So I hope that helps. But again, if anybody wants to have a chat, Robin, if you want to have a chat about this, please do drop me a line. Really happy to hear from you. Thank you. It's a big subject. It's a huge subject, actually.
Absolutely. And we've had another question as well come through, and somebody has asked, I'll just quickly stop sharing my screen again. So they've asked, how would you deal with people that you can't push aside, who don't understand mental health and who don't have an awareness of anxiety issues?
Okay, I'm assuming context, because it's really difficult to get the context in text. I'm assuming if somebody's come to you, so it's not so much about pushing aside, it's just knowing your boundaries. So I would say, a lot of people, when you first talk to them, you'll say, how are you? And that's it. Change the opening line to how are you feeling? It encourages some thought and actually a longer answer. People tend to, if they have that trust and rapport with you, they will tend to open up with you about actually how they're feeling. So it's not about kind of labeling, it's not about diagnosing or anything like that. It's very much about how having, again, a human-to-human conversation. How are you feeling? And actually, based on what they say, then you can start to kind of shape a signposted activity around that. So if you feel that they're struggling with confidence, it could be one way. If it's struggling, actually, I feel really stressed or I feel really tired, then again, there's different things. Again, it's a difference between counselling and coaching. There's so many different solutions. There's so many different options. It starts with just having an open conversation. So thank you so much for asking that question. Start with, how are you feeling? But also fully accept that if you do, I mean, there's lots of different kind of barriers to that as well. There's age, there's culture, there's something that how open people will be about this as well. But if you can start to kind of do a little bit of hand holding, it's very much not about pushing aside. It's actually doing the best that you can to have an open conversation with them, the human to human level. Again, don't be afraid to show a little bit of vulnerability yourself. And then you can start to really kind of understand where they're coming from. And again, that comes with that, because our default setting, and I absolutely get that push aside kind of comment really, our default setting is, if somebody is struggling, I'm the same. I think before I was into this, I would be, oh God, no, that's too much. I can't deal with it. I won't be able to help them. It takes away that barrier. So just have a conversation with somebody, ask them how they're feeling, and let them reply. Remember, it's the same with public speaking, actually. There's a good public speaking tip wrapped up in this. Silence is a vacuum. If you don't fill it, somebody else will. So ask the question and stop and let them talk. And I hope that helps. But again, same offer. Any questions, if you want to chat about that, just give me a shout.
That's great.
Thank you.
I think I'm conscious that we're coming a little bit close to time, so I think we'll just answer one more quickly. But again, as Nick said, please do get in contact with us if you do have any more after this session. So Sharon's asked, do you have any advice, and how would you deal with anxiety specifically at work, for example, a panic attack?
Okay, so if it's you, I think recognizing your triggers over following a pattern. Obviously, in terms of those boundaries I was talking about, making sure that you've got a lot of self-care mechanisms in that. I know that if I'm feeling anxious, then I kind of ramp up the buffer zones I was talking about, like the breaks, the breathing and the movement and the hydration, really ramp it up. So it actually kind of levels out a little bit. So if it is you, I think self-awareness is key, and you'll know exactly what that means to you. In terms of if it's trying to support anybody else, actually it does kind of fall down into that kind of crisis point. It's about kind of signposting them to immediate help where possible. Now, different organizations do this differently. Some of my clients have something called a manager's referral, is where that if they have a manager, or if you are a manager, you can actually refer without their permission, which I don't know fully about, but it's intriguing that you can do that. But most of the time, the emphasis is on hand-holding the other person to get that support. Panic attacks it needs to be medically sorted. There's no other way of doing that. And if it is somebody else and you're unsure, every single time reach for medical help. Every single time, even if it's just a bit as a precaution. It's much better to be safe in that situation, because everybody reacts differently. Everyone's experience is exactly the same.
No, for sure. Thank you. And one really quick
it's not everyone's experience is different, not exactly the same. We're just contradicting myself here. You know what I meant.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think this is a really great question to finish off on. John said, what was the country music reference again, please?
John, I love John. I could feel that coming through the room already. So the country music reference, there was Every Storm Runs Out of Rain, which is by Gary Allan. Great track. Actually, whilst I'm on the subject, there's also a great tune by one of my favourite female country singers, Ashley McBryde. Now, if you check out a song called Girl Going Nowhere, it's a great song to have on your motivational playlist. I've seen her live in London a couple of years ago, and she just tells a story of, and we all have this, we have people telling us we can't do something, we have people telling us we'll never be able to achieve it, and she had the same. So when she started playing guitar in the US in a local town, people said, well, it's a hobby, but it's not a job. And she got on the radio shows and she got a little bit bigger, and then people say, well, actually, when you fall on your what's it, we'll come back, we'll take you in, kind of stuff. Really magnanimous people we have around us sometimes. And then suddenly she was in a country she's never been to before, and she looked around and started playing. There was not an empty chair in the place. Like, everyone was singing the lyrics to her songs. as you just said, like sometimes the only way in life of actually achieving what you want to achieve is to achieve that like massive success. It's the only way you're going to shut people up. It's the only way you're going to kind of quell those limiting beliefs. And sometimes it's good having those kind of songs in your armory, so you've got that just to psych you up a little bit. A lot of this is why the mental illness versus mental health thing is so important. Actually, it's a really nice place to finish on as well. Mental illness and things like panic attacks and everything else, mental illness absolutely needs to be professionally treated. But from here on in, if you get nothing else from this session at all, start to view mental health like a muscle, something that you can exercise, something that you can flex, something that you can influence every single day, like your physical health. And you're going to give yourself an amazing chance of being smarter, stronger, happier, whatever that means to you. And that's exactly the way to go. So I hope that's been a good session for you guys. Thank you.
No, that's been an absolutely brilliant session. Thank you so much, Nick. And unfortunately, as every storm runs out of rain, and our webinar is running out of time as well. So thank you so much for everyone who's here today. And massive thank you, Nick, for being here and for that presentation. I absolutely loved it. I hope everyone else here did as well. And hopefully we'll speak to you all soon.